We were told during the COVID vaccine mania, and I believe that you were very attuned to this. I think I don't know why.
I have a lot to say about COVID.
You mentioned Vinay Prasad. Yeah. But an extraordinary piece of reporting has just come out about the COVID vaccine trials and children. Alex Berenson reported this, and I have been reliably informed that we are fine to go with this reporting and that this will be borne out in the coming days. His headline is, and it was an exclusive to him, the FDA may add a strict black box warning on the mRNA COVID shots for kids and teens,
Yep.
Millions of whom have already been given this thing, a black box warning. He reports the FDA may soon place this warning on the vaccines to alert physicians and parents of their link to childhood deaths. This is the strictest an agency can impose, this kind of warning. It's generally the last step they take before forcing a manufacturer to stop selling it. They're also considering an alternative, forcing Moderna and Pfizer to stop selling them to kids and teens, period. The potential move, he reports, follows the FDA's report on Friday that its reviewers had found COVID mRNA jabs killed at least 10 children and adolescents, and likely many more. He said they'd asked the FDA for comment, waiting to hear back. My sources tell me this is safe reporting. This actually is under consideration, and we're going to hear a report confirming this within days from the highest levels. This is an outrage, Chamath. This was forced on us. Every school, including my own, they were expelling boys who would not take the vaccine once they hit 16 and so on. This is downright dangerous, and it was sold to us by the Fauci, Biden, Collins administration under Joe Biden that refused to consider actual scientists like Vinay Prasad, who led this. He's leading this within FDA, who was an independent physician at Johns Hopkins at the time. And he was saying this at the time, saying these vaccines are causing deadly myocarditis in kids and teens. And he was scoffed at. He was marginalized like so many others and tried to dismiss as fringe. And now, thank God, under Trump and Marty McCary, he's been elevated to an important position. Your thoughts on it?
COVID is probably the most important historical moment of the last 50 years for the world. And it needs to be understood, I think, in three really important and critical things for the success and the future of the United States. The first is that we did not allow robust thinking and dissenting voices during that period, all the way up to being able to call places like Facebook and places like Twitter and telling them, places like Google, and telling them, take this down, or, put a warning on this, deboost that. That's the effective equivalent of a black box label for content. If you're not going to create even reasonable disclaimers and just suppress information, what the average person will do is come to a conclusion based on what is available to them. But if what is available to them is a small sliver of the total groupthink or of the total thought, you're going to get very narrow opinions. And it allowed a small group of people to control the narrative and then to make decisions. That is extremely dangerous in a democracy. So that's the first thing that we learned in COVID that has to change. So within that, I think we have to go and uncover all of the true underlying medical research and put it out into the light. The Great Barrington Declaration that Jay Bhattacharya wrote caused him to essentially get defenestrated from Stanford. And yet he turned out to be right as well. There are umpteen examples where very credible scientists were saying, let's just slow down here and think about this. And they were not allowed to say that. And that content was essentially suppressed. So rational, independent thinking people like you and me and your listeners could not come to our own conclusion. So that's number one. The second thing is that what we learned in COVID is, hold on a second, this globalist monoculture has made us super fragile. If somebody in some remote part of the world decides that they don't like what we're doing or saying, they can shut things off, and all of a sudden these supply chains go dark and our entire economy folds in on itself. That cannot be how a robust, resilient country like the United States thrives for the next 250 years. like we have in the last 250. So that was the second big thing. And then the third thing, which we still are not putting our finger on, is we have had a huge setback to kids. It created an enormous deficit from learning and from socialization. And I can speak personally about this myself. With 5 kids all sheltering in place for that period of time, when I look at the impacts, it's the children at that age that were 6, 7, and 8 who are today 11, 12, 13, and 14, of which I have two actually. My gosh, they really took a step backwards in their ability to learn, in their ability to engage. And I don't think we're doing the best for these children who are the future of our country in the next 20 or 30 years. So those 3 things in COVID, frankly, caused me extreme frustration. The lack of free speech and democracy, the lack of resiliency in the United States economy that we had created because we just outsourced everything to Davos and their ilk, and then the impact of our kids that we are still not addressing. I think that all of that needs to get put on display, and we need to be extremely honest about it. The problem that Biden did at the end, which I thought was extremely offensive, was by pre-pardoning all these folks, we essentially allow this get out of jail free card where you can't even interrogate the truth. So you can't even have an accounting for the future. You know, look, we have had huge mistakes in the past in the United States, but we've been able to have commissions. Those commissions can at a minimum write reports. Those reports can then be taken by think tanks. We may not agree with this process, but at least at a minimum, there is a way for good, sensible policy to then enter the water table. None of that will be possible here because so much of it is suppressed, or because we've already taken all of this stuff off the table. We can never even ask the questions. That is really wrong.
Here's the other problem. The media. They were
complicit.
Totally complicit.
Totally complicit.
Right? Totally complicit. They went along with it. Not everyone. I mean, independent media in our lane, All In and yours truly and Tucker and many others, were speaking up against the lies that we were being told, in particular when it came to children. But let me just give you one example, all right? When this was happening, I was listening to Dr. Vinay Prasad. I had never heard of him, but I was very attuned, thanks to Brett Weinstein and many others I do listen to, that there was a problem with these COVID vaccines, especially when it came to kids. And it led me to Dr. Vinay Prasad. I listen to his podcast all the time. And he's a doctor, and he was talking real truths about the COVID vaccines and about myocarditis and pericarditis, in particular in teenage boys, but teenage girls too, and in kids. And now he's at FDA, and now Alex Berenson reporting, again, we expect this to break from the highest level soon, reporting that Dr. Vinay Prasad wrote a 6-page note to staffers saying the real number of children and teenagers killed by the mRNA vaccines is likely much higher than 10 children. After looking at 96 deaths of kids aged 7 to 16, FDA reviewers found 10, quote, died after and because of receiving the COVID-19 vaccination. But that depends on voluntary reporting and is almost certainly a significant underestimate, Prasad wrote. In addition, the FDA reviewers excluded cases where records were ambiguous. And Berenson reports that one of these children died during the Moderna vaccine trial. And what they did with that kid was just to exclude him. They excluded him. We covered a case like this where we had on a guy who was vaccine injured. He was a biker, a mountain biker. He was vaccine injured during the whole process. And they excluded him from the trial. Or was it him and his wife? Or his wife, I had 2 on. In any event, they just wrote him out of the trial. So they didn't have to count him. So this is what was being done. And then those vaccines were made mandatory for our children. I want to say one note to scared parents right now. The information seems to be that, God forbid this thing were going to cause a death, it would have happened. Like it wouldn't be now 4 years later. Like you don't, yes, of course, get your child checked for sure. You should, for sure I'd be having my kid checked if they had a vaccine, but even without the vaccine, if they had COVID, get an EKG, get an echocardiogram. That's actually not too expensive. You can get your doctor to order it. And just check out their heart. That's all you need to do. But the real danger period is right after you get the vaccine. So don't worry if your child had the vaccine and is still fine. You likely avoided it. I don't want to scare people.
Go
ahead.
The one great thing is, I know Marty and I know Bobby and Jay. These are three exceptional Americans, and they are bulldogs for the truth. And so I suspect that if this comes to pass and there is a black box label, it's because they've done some pretty thoughtful research and they've rerun the data and they've, included the thing is that, you can exclude data, but that data is written down somewhere. So to the extent that they got their hands on this and was able to see it and they decide that the black box label is the right way to go, I really trust those three to do the right thing. The other thing,
Same.
the other thing that I'll say is that it would be really incredible over time where we can release some of this data in an anonymized way so that some of these new AI models could rerun some of these statistical analyses just to make sure that all the math was right. I think that's probably something that should happen anyways. That's something that the FDA could do in partnership with Google and Anthropic and OpenAI and Grok as an example. But I think it would give people a lot more certainty that the math and the analysis and the conclusions are defensible, not just in the eyes of the companies who have an economic incentive to get to a yes, but AI models who are trained to just be extremely truthful. And I think that could be a very helpful new tool in the arsenal of how we as a community, like, let's be honest, Megyn, I mean, you and I have both been prescribed drugs. It's really hard to understand what's going on. I just assumed that everything is done correctly. I remember that when I once said on the All In podcast, are you allowed to call something a vaccine that is 30 or 40% efficacious? That's when I got some of the most severe pushback ever, just to even ask that question, because when I think vaccine, when I get a vaccine, I'm protected for life. That's what I just kind of assumed. And so when I give my kids vaccines, that's what I'm thinking as well. But if I'm taking something that's 30 or 40% efficacious, it doesn't seem like a vaccine. It seems like a best efforts attempt. And that's when, at some point I stopped taking the flu vaccine because of that, because it's not really a vaccine. It's, my doctor tells me, yeah, 30 or 40% of the time it'll help you. 60% of the time you're on your own. And I wasn't even allowed to ask that question on air.
Yep. Well, so the media thing, back in, it was October 19th, 2022, just to walk down memory lane. And I'd been listening to Vinay and others, and I tweeted out the following because the CDC had just added the COVID vaccine to its list of mandatory or recommended school vaccinations. And I tweeted out the following: a scary number of kids are dying after taking the COVID vax from myocarditis, among other injuries. How dare the CDC add this to its list of school vaccinations? Don't listen. Be very careful with your teenage boys in particular, but girls too. These are not honest brokers. This is dangerous, with an exclamation point. The shitstorm that rained down upon me was massive and ongoing. I'll just give you a couple. The Daily Beast, which is literally wrong about everything all the time, tweeted out, Megyn Kelly's anti-vax lies are a threat to public health. Daily Beast, you fucking got kids killed. You got kids killed. I saved lives. This show saved lives, without question. The Hill, Megyn Kelly faces backlash over COVID tweet. It went on and on. Kara Swisher, Silicon Valley, speaking of Silicon Valley, this was the issue. Not long after this, literally 2 days after this, Vinay Prasad I'd been listening to, literally 2 days after this, my sister died, not of COVID. It's a long story, but she died. And I was supposed to do Kara Swisher's podcast and I had to cancel. So my assistant texted her saying she has a family emergency. She didn't, give up the farm. And Kara Swisher wrote back, oh, I'm sure it's a family emergency and not just she's afraid to come on now, given the storm around her stupid COVID tweets.
I'm really sorry.
And Abby was too polite to just shove it down her throat and say, actually, her sister's dead. And by the way, when she found out, she wasn't apologetic. She didn't say, oh my God, I'm such an asshole. Sorry for being such a jerk. Anyway, that's what was happening. That was the reaction to that. Chamath.
It's
a huge storm around me telling the truth.
Yeah.
And I did a whole talking points memo on it the very next day, a whole talking points, giving the examples of what I was talking about, kids who were dying from this. And now we have the FDA finally coming out, about to put a black box warning on this thing, saying it was all true. Where's the media accountability? Where's the apology from The Hill, the Daily Beast, from Kara Swisher? Why won't any of the dishonest brokers come out and say, we're sorry?
I think that what has to happen are a couple of really important things. The first is that places like you, places like All In, whoever is willing to just independently call balls and strikes, we have to find a way of growing and thriving. And I think that while we're doing a good job, I think it's still very fragile for independent media. We're still reliant on large distribution channels like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Google and X. And at any point, if those fall into the wrong hands, or we go back to repressive or regressive regimes around free speech, the ability to talk about an issue, from all angles will disappear. That's what we can fix, which is we have to become economically viable to be independent forever, so that even if all of those places at some point say, hey, you know what, I don't like what you're saying, you can somehow, get access to satellite internet and start broadcasting your own thoughts independent of everybody else. Now, what does that require? I think what that requires is extreme privacy and a monetary system that can be shielded. Now, that's a risk today, because I think, there's still a lot of ways in which wrongthink can be punished. And wrongthink ebbs and flows depending on who you are. Like, the European government of wrongthink is very different than what.
Totally right.
Right. And and we've seen this, by the way.
So I've seen it. You guys you get suppressed. Your videos get suppressed. They get lower circulation if you have wrongthink in them. And in my case,
the 3 videos from our summit that were deboosted?
I get ultimately savaged by the media for something else. They make up some fake controversy to try to diminish my voice because they recognize I'm a threat.
Look at one of my best friends and, my bestie on the pod, David Sachs. Look at this weekend, this huge trash burger that was written by the New York Times. Complete garbage. Now, and frankly, I talked to David along the way over these months, just seeing how he was dealing with it. And I was so shocked at how patient he was and how forthright he was, because he was like, there's nothing to see here. And it was 5 people over 5 months trying to dig something up. And ultimately, when they found nothing, they tried to write the most hurtful headline, probably with the presumption that maybe most people will just read the headline and move on, and we will inflict the damage we want to see in what is an incredible American.
Ever read the label on a typical bag of chips? It's often a science experiment of seed oils, MSG, artificial dyes, and mystery ingredients. Masa is part of the growing movement to bring back real food. Masa chips contain just 3 ingredients: organic corn, sea salt, and 100% grass-fed beef tallow. Not only do these chips avoid the bad stuff, they also taste delicious too. Snacking on Masa chips is nothing like eating regular chips. With Masa, you feel satisfied, light, and energetic with no crash and no bloat. And if you love Masa, then you will love Vandy Crisps. Vandy, which is Masa's sister company, makes the most delicious 3-ingredient potato chips too. Ready to give Masa or Vandy a try? Use code MK for 25% off your first order at masachips.com or vandycrisps.com, or simply click the link in the video description or scan the QR code to claim this delicious offer. Don't feel like ordering online? Masa and Vandy are now available nationwide at your local Sprouts supermarket. Stop by and pick a couple of bags up before they're all gone.
Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.